My name is Alistair Lawrence. I'm the Special Projects Editor at Times Higher Education, and I'm delighted today to be joined by an expert panel from academia and industry who are Bachman Bálint, Rector at the Budapest Metropolitan University in Hungary, Michael Hannon, Vice President for Academic Affairs and Registrar, Galway Mayo University of Technology in Ireland, Andy Poole, Director of Partnerships at Coursera for Campus, Wolfgang Pree, Professor at the University of Salzburg, Austria, and Niamh Segoya, President of SEK Education Group. We'll also be joined shortly by Anastasia Amanina, who's Vice Rector of International Affairs at St. Peter's Electrotechnical University in Russia. Skills education is becoming the subject of increasing attention from educations and policymakers around the world. Yesterday, the UK was the latest country to announce a new bill that will enable people to access flexible funding for higher education and access to a lifelong loan entitlement that will give individuals access to the equivalent of up to 4 years worth of student loans that they can use flexibly across their lifetime at colleges as well as universities. So this is clearly an emerging global trend and one that will require all universities to adapt their teaching and learning offering accordingly if they haven't done so already. I'd like to start today by diving straight in with the panel and asking you how universities can utilize blended learning in particular in order to scale the teaching of subjects that are most in demand from industry. I'm aware that several of the panelists today are from universities that already have very strong links with industry and links with placements. So I was hoping that somebody could give an example from their university or their organization about how they're already starting to address this. Bachman, is it possible to come to you first, please?
Yes, thank you. Yes, and recently we experienced during the lockdown where our personal presence in the education was not possible, the need for the digital tools, and not just online teaching, but to use these platforms for conducting the courses. At our university, we switched from one day to another to online education, and even it was necessary, but it was still a challenge. And upon these experiences, we decided after a year conducting education fully online that we need some professional tools to implement. Even if we are returning back to the teaching with the presence of the students. So we are absolutely dedicated now to use Coursera-based online platform. And right now we are preparing the September starting semester by implementing the courses offered at Coursera to the subject curricula. We are doing that by asking the teachers, the educators, to choose courses that they think are related to their topics and offer it for the students. This is just the first step, so that we kind of offer some further competence and knowledge for the students by using the online platform.
Budapest has a very strong, very large number of partnerships with industry. So you're working very hard to give your students placement and real world experience in order to make them as employable as possible. How does something like an online platform help you target the skills that employers need the most? Is it a question of having more conversations with your industry partners and refining the courses in response to that?
Yes, exactly. We use these partnerships, of course, on one hand to provide some places, working places for our students in many of the study programs that we provide, like business or creative industries or tourism. It's necessary to have an internship at a company for the students. So it's a challenge. That is why the number of partners is so high. On the other hand, if we are already in touch with these entities, we of course would like to learn their perspective of the skills and competencies of the next generation of professionals, and it does happen. And what we are introducing more and more is the so-called project-based education, where students study program throughout the different subjects are related to one project that they are working on throughout the semester. And in these projects, we involve the companies and other entities, and I think this is the best way to learn through the project what they are interested at, what the students should learn and know as they enter the labor market.
Great, thank you very much. Michael, I'd like to come to you next, if I can, just to talk a bit about how universities can help address the gap in that employers constantly identify in the job market of a lack of skilled graduates entering the workplace and needing additional training. At your institution, you had a learning transformation initiative that was the initial response to the pandemic and lockdown. Is it a case of refining those kind of online initiatives in order to refine the offering, or is there a case for actually engaging locally with business partners so you can be of the most use in terms of giving students the skills they need?
Yeah, thanks, Alistair. Yeah, part of our strategic mission and ethos is to engage with industry and ensuring that our graduates are employable. So when we actually design our programs, we actually engage industry partners in the, if you like, the co-creation of the curricula to ensure that the material is relevant, so that when the eventually employ our graduates, that they are ready to hit the ground running, so to speak. However, you know, when COVID hit, we, like everybody else, we transitioned to online delivery, and that was necessary. We were actually moving towards online delivery anyhow. Well, not completely. We had a project in place as part of our strategic initiative on digital transformation, and that was about sort of recognizing that this is the future. And fortunately, we had some initiatives put in place prior to COVID, the likes of having instructional designers in place, developing content and starting to roll that out. So we were able to crank that up at speed, and we were able to do that then with the assistance of looking at relevant courses that we could pick from Coursera that could actually supplement and complement what we're already doing, because we felt that we didn't have the time to pivot everything online immediately, as you can imagine, and we had to get in support to do that. It's well recognized that there is a gap between the skills acquired and the skills required. And government have recognized that actually in Ireland, and are supporting universities and institutions to actually address the labour market deficits, and are supporting, if you like, by way of providing competitive funding calls, so that you're bidding for offering courses that are particularly targeted towards industry, in addition to your normal programs that are developed with industry and that are delivered in a more flexible and agile manner. When you are engaging with industry, the online piece works very well because you can cover a broader spectrum of the region and of the country, and even outside of the country, through the online platforms, and it reduces the need for face-to-face attendance. However, we in our institution in particular, and for quite a few of the institutions that I would represent, we are very STEM focused, and there is certainly a deficit in the ability of online to address the acquisition of skills, practical skills, where you have to be in the lab, in the workshop, acquiring the skills in an applied manner. It's very hard to replicate that in a virtual environment. Now progress is being made, and a lot of work is done, I would say, particularly in the science area. I was impressed that there are so many virtual activities available that replicate science experiences that can be actually produced, that provide what is needed. But in general, it's difficult to address that in its entirety. The other skills gap, that employers identify is, if you like, the transferable skills, in addition to the discipline-specific skills. And these are the critical thinking, the creativity, the self-management, being a team player, and those types of skills. Sometimes employers tell us that these are actually more valuable than the discipline-specific skills, because they can acquire the discipline-specific ones on site when they actually do come onto the workplace. But if they don't have the ability to work as a team player, they may not fit into the organizational ethos that they're going into. So it's important that these types of skills are embedded and nurtured in how we engage with our students as well.
Brilliant, thank you, Michael. Wolfgang, can I come to you next? Just somewhere you have a specialty in computer science at University of Salzburg. So on one hand, you are teaching graduates who have these hugely in-demand skills, but as Michael touches on, there's also this pressing requirement that people have the skills required for after they graduate so that they can excel in their jobs once they have the knowledge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for inviting me in the introduction. Yes, we are focused on computer science. And I mean, there you have an interesting situation with the employers, because they usually use something or wish for something that is, I wouldn't say outdated in every case, but which is not so much forward-looking. So we have to balance both what is required now and what will be required maybe in a few years or maybe 5 to 10 years down the road. And so there are easy choices like machine learning, deep learning is something that for sure takes off, and it will be in the short term, so you don't have to wait long. And it was very valuable to have Coursera providing the skills also for us as teachers, because if you're not up to date, it's tough to teach and to understand. So that's very valuable. And another very valuable thing, which is probably in the past 5 to 10 years, cloud computing really took off. So if you do application development, it's usually hosted in the cloud, private or public. And as a university, you would have a hard time to replicate professional environments, to administer those without, and making sure that students don't damage anything. So you cannot replicate, for example, the environment that the bank is using. But Coursera allows that, and that's a big bonus. So you have, with the Google courses in particular, you can really use the infrastructure as if you would work in a big company and still are in a sandbox. That's, I would say, extremely valuable to have that. And I mentioned the balancing act in the beginning. The forward-looking thing is, and that's probably the toughest thing to teach anyway in computer science and probably in general, is the skill of abstraction. To abstract from details, to be able to, what is essential, and in particular, to become a really good engineer, software engineer, you have to see, I would call it, complexity traps. Many in the industry only value that the functions are present. You need some functionality in an application, in a software, and if it works, it's fine. But if it works and you add unnecessary complexity, it's bad, because it's really tough to maintain, to understand that other team members can continue on that. So teaching this is tough. And you might ask, how could Coursera support that? By teaching standard stuff, like algorithms, whatever, by means of Coursera courses, and then focus in really small groups with the students. We are not big, I have to tell you that. So we are probably 700-800 students in the bachelor's and master's. So it's a quite small department. And so we can then offer courses with groups of 3 to 5 to in particular focus on kind of practice teaching, but with this focus on avoiding complexity and learning how to abstract and what is bad in the technologies that employers use now and what should be done, and to detect that if those technologies pop up in the future, so that they are the pioneers then in the companies to go to the significant next step. Probably to give an example, because it's very abstract now, yeah? And nowadays you develop applications for an iPhone, for Android, for the web. On the web you have 50 platforms. Yeah? Each browser, each version of a browser is a different platform. Yeah? It really drives you crazy if you test or have to test all this stuff. And of course it would be a huge step if this would be abstracted away. And the current way to do it, it's one technology, it's called Angular. It does a little bit of abstraction, but it's still very bad in the sense you have so many details to take care of. And then there is something new by accident, by chance from Google, about Flutter, which totally abstracts from these platforms. So you write it as the original Java idea, write it once, run anywhere. And if you don't know about that's important, and that's a huge next step. You will probably stick much longer if you work for an employer with the old way of doing it because you're used to it. But you have an enormous extra effort to produce solid products, software products. And to have this awareness, that's probably the balancing act, which is very necessary to teach.
Great, thank you, Wolfgang. Niels, I was wondering if I could come to you next. I think Wolfgang made a really interesting point about you're managing the expectations of the employers who want a certain skill, but you're also having to manage expectations of students for what kind of problems they will encounter when they go from working in an academic environment to working in an employment environment. And I'm aware that with the SDK Education Group, you foster the development of skills, and you also put a priority on innovation and interdisciplinary studies and having an international approach. It seems like you're baking in quite a broad outlook where you're trying to teach students to anticipate the type of problems that the cultural problems maybe that Wolfgang's talking about when you move from academia into the workplace.
Well, thank you, Alistair, and thank you for the invitation. Yes, actually, our group is our education group is a little different in that we have a group of international schools, 9 international schools, SEK plus the Universidad Camilo José Cela. So that means that we are able to really cover the whole lifelong learning cycle, from maybe 4 months old, we have students, to 70, 80-year-olds who are doing second degrees, whatever. That being said, I think that what we are able is to address what I think is one of the major problems that the traditional education system is having, is how it's structured. So this is the school, so these are schools, this is the university, and then this is the workplace. And where we need to start thinking about employability, it's probably at the end of somewhere between the degree and the master's, etc. So so that's where we're looking for solutions to problems. We shouldn't be there if we have the right types of conversations and there were no gaps, that there was a seamless transition in what I call the whole cycle of talent creation that really we know expands the whole of our lives for everyone, because we've seen how much we've had to unlearn over the past year and then relearn again, and we've been looking for our own personalized ways to reach that knowledge, whatever it was, whether that was in a traditional classroom, digital or not, but traditional, in a traditional setting, or whether it was somewhere else. So so we know there's different ways of learning, and we need to do this across the whole of our lives. And that being said, for us, and this a partnership that we are having now with Coursera, and that I'm delighted to announce this Lighthouse project with them, allows us to become somehow the learning companions of our students, whether it's in and out of our own institution and throughout the whole of their lives, and trying to reach them in their needs. So what we're going to start now actually is working with non-traditional, I would say, Coursera students, in terms of it's not for our university students where we're starting to work, but it's rather with high school students and with our alumni and parents as professionals and parents as parents of our community. Because if there's one thing we've learned during this pandemic is that the role of the community and the importance of creating this whole learning ecosystem that needs to be stronger than ever. So why are we a community? Because we share a common purpose, and that purpose is learning, and that's what turns us into a learning community. And with the help now with Coursera and this very exciting agreement that we've reached and on which we're working, will allow us to offer our high school students new perspectives, new courses, university level courses on those soft skills we've been talking about, and some others more career-oriented, subject-based, so that they can more easily try to choose what's the pathway into university. So this way, we're trying to close that gap between schools and university. We're doing it within our group, but I think it's a good example for others, maybe, so that we can try and see that there are not those interruptions in the learning of our students. And then with alumni, it's the same thing. And with parents, are part of our community, and how we can be their companions. As I said, for that, we need to be able to offer them a larger, broader catalog of courses, and trying to understand what their needs are. We know that they have to reskill and outskill and upskill, etc. And they're all doing that. They tell us. We have a very good network of alumni, both from schools and university. So we're trying to understand them, and Coursera is actually helping us a lot in trying to really give them an offer that's really relevant, that's significant, and where we as an educational institution can be their advice, that can give their guides as they move on in that lifelong learning journey. So of course there are skills to be taught, and there is employability, but I see it like in this larger concept, that to be as an institution where our students and when our students need us.
Great, thank you. Andy, perhaps that's a good point to bring you in, particularly to Niv's point about creating a larger ecosystem where you can interact with people at different points during their life, when they're starting higher education, but then also during the course of their working life, if they need to upskill or reskill for any reason. But also to the point about alumni engagement becoming increasingly important, because it is a relationship where universities can leverage the relationships they have with employers in a slightly different way. Is this becoming a more pressing requirement for the university partners that Coursera has? Oh, I think you're on mute.
Certainly, it is. So we're speaking with universities, and I mean, I think when we launched Coursera for Campus 18 months ago, I don't think we necessarily understood how diverse the needs of universities would be. And so when we have conversations, every university and higher education provider is looking for different things. They have different challenges. They're often constrained by different things, be they a private university or a state university, the locality that they're operating in, their target audience. And so we've noticed that they're looking for very different things. Alumni is one of those for sure. So it's how to continue to engage, how to leverage alumni to build those relationships with industry, how to leverage alumni sometimes for development purposes as well, for funding sources as government budgets tighten often, and certainly providing this kind of means of continuing to provide value to students for a lifelong learning is really key. And we're seeing there's a lot of direction from governments as well in this area. So increasingly, when we look at the government development plans, there's this sense that there's this constant upskilling that needs to take place in society, in the economy, and how our traditional universities, which have always been focused on this kind of 18 to 22 type age group, how are they going to have the capacity and be able to adapt for that audience? And so we believe that through tools like Coursera, there's this increased capacity, this agility, and yeah, earlier Michael mentioned agility. And one of the things that we find talking to universities is they have different degrees of agility, but none of them have enough agility to what they want to do. They're all constrained in kind of different ways. And so hopefully Coursera can help them to be more agile.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that makes an interesting point about where the agility comes from at universities when they're trying to change and they're trying to adapt, because let's be honest, they're all under a lot of pressure now. They're in the spotlight. Various governments are saying they're not doing enough or they're not doing the right things, and they're being forced to change the way they deliver education in a very short time frame anyway because of the shift to online. I was wondering if I could ask the panel, are there increasing requirements for you to increase your scale, increase the number of people that you are teaching, educating them to a specific requirement? Is this something that you are looking at already? And how much of that can be achieved by really trusting your staff, trusting your educators to innovate and to use new tools in order to get the best out of teaching and learning? Michael, would you like to?
Yeah, thanks, Alistair. Yeah, I mean, the answer is absolutely yes. There is increased pressure coming on our system to take in extra students. There is actually increased demand as well, because we're in a demographic bulge, where the population is increasing that is eligible to go to higher education. So that creates its own challenges in the context of funding and capital buildings requirements. But that's not going to come on stream quick enough to address the problem. So therefore, alternative solutions have to be looked at. And we're looking at them like everybody else in how we respond to this increased demand with limited resources and limited capital infrastructure. One of the areas we're looking at is embedding work-based learning more into the programs, so that students will go out probably in year 3, not just for a semester anymore, but we're targeting 2 bachelor programs that they're going out for a full year in the industry, in the workplace, and that they will be supported with the academic backup of online modules, so that they're full-time on site in the workplace with access to modules then that they would pick up that are delivered online. And that seems to be working very well in the context of addressing that.
Great, thank you, Michael. Berin, I was wondering how the higher education landscape is changing for you in Hungary, and will there be a requirement to educate more domestic students? Are you looking to expand and give a more international offering? What do you think universities can achieve by offering a bigger, more skills education and more courses?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we still have to keep on targeting inspiring student journey and a good learning experience by providing new tools. And by the way, it's not just for students, but for the educators as well. So if you ask about our experience in Hungary, and this was one of the reasons why we cooperated with Coursera, because we see the need on the educators side to be educated. To be honest, part of the lecturers are more keen to be present, and they look at digital tools like something maybe necessary. They do agree with that, but they are not happy about that. To be honest, I count myself to this part of educators, but I can see and I agree that this has its benefits, and we experienced it during the lockdown. So my experience is that we have to educate the educators to use these tools in a proper way. In our experience in many of the study courses, we had to make major changes in the course description. It was necessary because of some in Hungary, everything is quite regulated, which is not bad because of quality assurance. But you have to make a note, and you have to clarify everything that you change in the curricula. And it was necessary to prepare practically a digital course description syllabus for all the study programs, which we did. What maybe else I would mention that I think these digital content and tools are really challenging and make possible the study program overlapping cooperation among students. So what we are trying now is that a student of art or creative, let's say a designer, works on his project, which is a design object maybe, with a student of business and with one of communication, so that they practically imitate to produce a product and bringing it to the market. This is just maybe even just a small project at the beginning, let's say second or third semester, but it's a very different attitude from the students that is required, and of course from the teachers. And this must be set in the curriculum, and this is what is challenging. Coursera and digital school can help that to ease the working load of the teachers in terms of providing educational content that can be provided digitally, and they can use the Coursera courses for that by implementing those courses to their course. Maybe the next step is that our educators themselves will produce such contents, even with the help of Coursera.
So I think we were describing is helping students kind of collect and order knowledge in different ways. So they're gaining knowledge, but they're also gaining experience of working in different ways, and they're picking up different types of competencies because of that. Has this generally been popular among the students when you've introduced it? Berend, sorry, I had a follow-up question to ask, just how your students have responded to the new way of working that you've described.
Yes, a majority of the students responded well. We just introduced it, so this semester. So from the 1,000 Coursera licenses, 500 are already in use, and another 500 we provided for the educators and interested local students of us who partly learn in English or they just do speak English. So yes, there's an interest. It's still a challenge, I would say, to pursue the educators to implement these contents to their existing teaching process, which I do believe is difficult. And right now we are having trainings for the educators for doing so.
Great, thank you very much. Wolfgang, let's come to you next, just to comment, as an educator yourself, how have you noticed much of a cultural shift during this time in terms of changing the way that people are teaching and learning? Have you and your colleagues generally found the delivery of it challenging? Are there things that could have been done better? Or because of the subject that you teach, is it quite a natural progression to move everything online?
Mm-hmm. Well, probably I don't reply directly to this question a bit later. There's one interesting aspect here in Austria going on. It started actually before the pandemic, that universities will get paid from the ministry, the public universities, depending on the number of students who get more than 16 ECTS points per year. So it depends on the number of students, what you get paid, the budget depends on that. And this is, I would say, quite independent of the pandemic, but by chance now in the same time frame. I think everybody knows you always have lecturers or teachers who are not perfect, yeah? In the sense it's either a huge hurdle to pass the exam, or the content is just boring or outdated or whatever. And at least this freedom is still kept, freedom of teaching. So you cannot change the way people teach. But what Coursera allows is to compete with that. So you open up a competition and offer the same subject as a Coursera course. And then you open up, or kind of, it's not the danger is that you lower the standard. You don't want to do that. But there are some guys, teachers, who have a very high hurdle, which doesn't make sense. If you study computer science and you have a particular math subject and only 17% pass, then you have a problem, because that's the maximum number who do the bachelor's degree. So this is, I think, a very important tool, at least in universities which have this budget issue, that the number of students who pass influences directly the budget you get. So that could be an interesting use case of Coursera.
Yeah, it sounds like you have very unique circumstances in Austria. Another question I wanted.
It's not only here. I mean, it's in general, where you have bottlenecks, either quality-wise or for whatever reason. The big ego of a teacher, I don't know. I mean, there are many reasons that lead to that.
I had another question for you, which was to ask about whether moving to a digital first and model and teaching more skills, does that enable more interdisciplinary study, do you think, or will it be?
It opens up, I mentioned the one thing before, to do more practice stuff, but you could also add content which is, I think, overdue to add, at least in computer science, like ethics or philosophy or things like that, which are not in the curriculum now. So that's definitely another possibility. And just wanted to ask, because I think it's okay also to ask the other panelists, Balint, because I just read it in the news today in Hungary. There's also quite competition from bricks and mortar universities. There's, I think, quite a discussion of the Chinese university Fudan coming to Budapest. So, I mean, the competition is not only, in the virtual world, also in the bricks and mortar. What do you think of that?
Balint, have you had a chance to form an opinion on how things are changing in that regard?
Yes, to my information, Fudan is expected to start study programs in 2025. So we still have some time to prepare for the competition. But for sure, yes, and not just international universities who move to the region, but in Hungary now, I think it's now up to 17% of students entering higher education leave the country. And many of them go to Austria, where there's no entrance exam and anything in some study courses. So, and some of the students can afford to study abroad. So there's a competition already.
Nevis, I'd like to come to you next, just to ask you about the points that both Wolfgang and Balint made about the possibilities of greater interdisciplinary studies and curricula being put together where you have subjects combined that perhaps weren't combined previously. As Wolfgang talked about, building in ethics courses into STEM courses and computer science, and also the internationalism that we just mentioned, where now there is going to be increased competition. To your earlier point about how you can build an entire ecosystem, does that become much more challenging when you have all of these extra factors to consider about what is right for different types of learners and what people in different regions will prioritize the most?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'd just like to go a little back to the comments we're making about what we learned during the pandemic and how we had to transition all of our activities into online. My feeling was that there wasn't just one shift. I mean, there wasn't just the shift of turning from in-person learning to online learning. There were many others because, of course, the whole education process is very interdependent. So if you change the place, you need to change the time, but then you need to think about the assessment, then you need to think about the curriculum, what content is it really relevant, significant content that you're delivering, and then who delivers it, and with who are our students learning, and who is actually learning, are we all aware, etc. So so there was lots of learning that happened during that year, and what we did in the middle of it is think, of course, this is a fabulous opportunity. This is like a living lab, despite the terrible circumstances that we were living. So we launched this think tank in the middle of the whole pandemic crisis to think about the future and learning. It was not the future of learning, it's the future and learning. And what are the connections between future and learning, which are really so tight? And we had over 50 experts from across the world trying to think about what would the future of higher education look like, in essence. And one of the takeaways was that we're really in the verge now of repurposing higher education, formal higher education, I would say. We're very clear that we all need lots of learning. What is the role that higher education institutions are going to play within that new scenario, that new landscape for all of us? And so we do think that we have to repurpose ourselves to still be relevant, to still lead progress in society, to still contribute to the community, etc. And parts of that relate to the question you were asking, which is, well, how do we take in knowledge and do we make it transdisciplinary or interdisciplinary, and how do we collaborate? Well, fact number one is that the knowledge used to belong to us educational institutions, and now it's overflow classrooms. It's out there. Everyone can access it. So there are many more things we can do with it, which is good. I mean, I'm an optimistic when I think about the future of learning and the role that we could be playing. But of course, we cannot be playing it on our own. That's why we need partners like Coursera that can help us to broaden our capacity, our resources in terms of the knowledge and the content and the learning opportunities we give to our students. I think that in this global world, and we're talking about international connections and collaboration, which is one of the competencies that you can only acquire if you really work on it. We cannot just have our students stick to the formal curriculum by which it will be assessed and get a certificate that will allow them to do X and Y. This is all very different now, we know. So we need many more resources. We need to be able to access different types of contents. We need partnerships. We need friends in this learning ecosystem. And as I said, the ecosystem is not just within our own community of learners, but it's broader. Coursera is now part of our learning ecosystem. It's a pivotal part. And the next step actually in it is going to be something that you mentioned very rightly, which is educators. It's how are we going to help teachers in schools and university to be really fit, to be prepared, to be and to be much more purposeful in what they do within their own classrooms, and be able to co-create even with their own students, whether they are 14-year-olds, 10-year-olds, or 50-year-olds, new ways of teaching and learning. So as I say, to become possible, we need more fluid transitions. We need many more resources, and we need to break the formal structures that are really not working anymore. And we knew that before the pandemic, and now it just become much more clear.
Great, thank you very much. Andy, I'd like to come to you next. Just have a couple of questions that are partly inspired by the questions that the people have been dropping in the chat box. So thank you everyone for putting questions to the panel. One is the question that Bennett and Nevis both talk about, which is the need to help educators out of their comfort zone in a way that is sustainable, so they could start to teach and rely on the new tools that they've got in a different way, and also channel their own creativity and innovation, so they're teaching courses that they find stimulating and that delivers the maximum benefit for students. Are there patterns emerging already in terms of how people use Coursera's platform to do this?
There are indeed, yeah. So one of the things that one of the big growth areas has been, as Balint mentioned, actually using Coursera for faculty development. And so that's been a key area. So there's lots of digital content, teaching digitally, that's been on Coursera to enable faculty to kind of enhance their creativity and their comfort with the online environment that they're in right now. But then moving beyond that, one of the kind of most popular areas has been authoring tools that Coursera has developed that enables faculty to adapt content that exists within Coursera or create their own content and kind of tailor it so that they're in this situation where they're comfortable with what they're delivering, and they're not in this situation where they're necessarily out of their comfort zone in a bad way. And I think it's helpful for us all to be out of our comfort zone to different degrees, but in a kind of in a way where they have control. And then in terms of the types of patterns that we're seeing in terms of content use, etc. I mean, clearly the what you would expect around digital skills development, there's a huge demand for that. And what we're pleased that we're seeing is that that's not just coming from technical universities. We're not just seeing that technical universities are pushing technical skills. We're seeing that universities that maybe are maybe more under pressure for funding. So, for example, in liberal arts, we're seeing that there's a real appetite there for boosting employability, because I think none of us want this kind of world where everything is kind of moving towards this more sort of uniform kind of needs. We want this diversity across education. So we're seeing that Coursera is being used to kind of supplement these different areas, which is really encouraging.
One other thing that we've had a couple of questions about has been around the gaps in data in terms of managing students' journey through higher education. Now, obviously, we're right at the part of this new model for learning, so it's going to take time to gather quality data. But in regards to supporting things like student and staff well-being, which if you don't do that, it becomes very, very difficult to do anything else. Are there metrics that can be used in terms of looking at perhaps the dwell times, the courses that people are choosing to educate themselves, the type that are the most popular when people are left to be independent learners and self-starters? Are these all things that can be used to perhaps build part of a larger wellbeing strategy where people are properly supported to teach and learn?
Absolutely. So I think one of the benefits of the platform is that there are more than 80 million learners. And that gives us immense data from all different points. And so when educators have access to the Coursera platform, there's this back end that they see around the analytics of how learners are engaging with the platform. So it's possible to get recommendations around which learners need to be focused on, which learners might need support. So there's this kind of tailoring at the individual level that it's possible, I think, in a virtual environment to lose. And that I know through the pandemic, there's been this real issue that you haven't had that possibility to be present with students in the same way. And we've actually seen that through the pandemic, some of the most popular courses on Coursera, and that's both within universities and independently, have been around well-being. So there's a course on the science of well-being, which is within Coursera. That's one of the most popular courses. And so hopefully courses like that can be integrated into universities as kind of cross-curricular support, because mental health is such a massive issue. And I think it's very difficult for universities to create their own content from scratch in there. So that's another way that hopefully Coursera can help.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Michael, I'd just like to come to you because you previously touched on, where identifying key areas around STEM and other courses that real value can be added in terms of teaching the right kind of skills. Is it important to take the kind of holistic approach that Andy's talking about?
Absolutely, Alistair. We surveyed both our staff and our students to see what impact this transition to online learning had on them, and the anxiety impact cannot be underestimated, and that's very high during the COVID. Going back to the cultural shift, like everybody was forced to shift to online. There's no choice there, whether you wanted to or not, whether you had the skills to or not. And I'd have to applaud, our staff, and I'm sure it's the same right across the world. with the efforts that they made in engaging with this new technology and the innovations that they embraced in actually transitioning their pedagogical approach to actually online delivery, and that worked. The impact of that is that a lot of the staff now like the innovations that they have experienced and like the supports that they've got, and they have been supported through CPD, through Coursera, through other initiatives we put in place. But fundamentally, they still long for and yearn for the face-to-face interaction, the social interaction, the socio-cultural environment that they've been used to. So the same thing came back from the student surveys. And then the students are operating, as you can imagine, in unsatisfactory environments. In a lot of cases, they're in their bedrooms, like they're in the sitting room where there is noise or whatever it might be, and they're not seeing their friends and all of that. So as we transition back, and we're never going to get back to where we were, and I'm not so sure that we even should, and this is what has been discussed, that it will be a new norm for sure. But as we get back to this new norm, there will be a drop in the current engagement with online, but there will be a more sustainable integration of blended and hybrid. There's new modes of learning now appearing. We're hearing new language. Like I had to have hybrid delivery explained to me quite recently. And we are moving from going fully online to going towards a hybrid model, towards probably a blended model. And some programs and areas and disciplines will be more comfortable in the 100% face-to-face environment. So there's going to be a complete mixture of modalities of teaching in response to what people have experienced and what they want to continue with going forward. And we have to be open to allowing that.
Great, thank you, Michael. We've got about 10 minutes left, so we've got time for a couple of other points for discussion if we can. One thing I wanted to ask about was just based on the comments that people have made so far, is whether or not peer learning and students working in groups will become increasingly important as we've identified what works well online in terms of giving people access to a huge amount of resource that they wouldn't have had previously. But as Michael mentioned, the problem is that you're losing the human aspect. You're losing the interaction with different people. And to take us back to the top of the discussion, one of the things we were talking about is how you can produce a highly skilled student who is not necessarily a highly employable one, because again, to Michael's point, the skills that are acquired and required are sometimes quite different. Nevis, I was wondering, given the sort of network approach that you take at SEK, is this something that you look at in terms of giving people the social experience of learning in groups and having to learn the skills that everyone's talking about today, sort of like working in teams, listening to other people's ideas, being a good communicator, all of the other things that employers say that they put such a high priority on?
Yes, well, actually, during the pandemic, that goes a little back to the questions we were asking ourselves during the pandemic. It was not just that we shifted in place, it's that everything shifted. And one of those things was, who are we learning with and in which ways are we doing it? So students all over the world were reaching out to peers, to family members, to places on the web, etc., that they wouldn't have maybe been approaching before. So that opened up to new ways of collaboration. And in the end, after the pandemic, the first few months, we really understood that the technology had been really a community builder. It was of course, the only resource we had to come together. It wasn't easy to do it physically, but it was a good community builder because it allowed us to be working on projects with, in our case, with students from different schools, from different countries. It allowed for teachers to do much more peer learning because there was actually a need to step out of that comfort zone you were talking about before. And then we had peers, and before maybe we wouldn't think about reaching out to them, but we could, and we did because we needed to. And that's one of the things that we need not forget. I mean, it's very important that we have some takeaways, very important takeaways. And once the pandemic's over, and we all hope it will soon be over, even if things change, some of the change has to be good, because there's things we implemented that hopefully are here to stay. And one of them is this idea of we do have a physical ecosystem, but we'll always have a digital one, like a digital layer that will only make richer that learning experience, and that would allow for those competences to develop in ways different to in-person experiences, but are just different. They're not better or worse. And we know some of our students prefer to learn online certain things, and others prefer to learn in person other things, the same way as some students prefer books and others prefer their laptops. But right now we have so many resources available and so many opportunities and possibilities that our role really is how are we able to combine them in intelligent ways to really reach every student where they are. And this is where, for example, having Coursera and other content and platforms that allow us to do things that were maybe not feasible years ago, or maybe they were feasible, but we weren't using them. And because we had to use them, and we did use them, so we've really grown into this. Well, we went into this very steep learning curve where we're still in. And I hope that we never let that go, that we really continue to be going up and up, upwards and upwards. Because if not, again, it's about the purpose of the world, of the role we're playing, and we really want to be present in this, not just in the future, but in presently, and being able to deliver very high quality, very flexible, very personalized learning pathways to each one of our students.
Great, thank you very much. Andy, if I just come to you next, Neil's point about greater personalization, it's quite easy to understand how that would work using a platform such as Coursera, but in terms of the greater internationalization and the culture clashes that you deal with and everything else, I mean, are universities starting to think about their international partnerships in different ways? Because the culture clashes we're describing, they're even amplified even more if you're an international student coming into a new environment this way.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think every university's had to rethink its internationalization strategy in the context of not being able to travel. And I know that, Erasmus Plus and all of the various other schemes are having to adapt accordingly. I mean, just to revisit the previous point, I feel very passionately that platforms such as Coursera are not a threat in terms of the interaction or the personalization for students. I think quite the opposite. I think they open up the possibilities of doing this flipped classroom model where Balint mentioned earlier on, where you take groups and you make it much smaller, much more personal. I don't see the great personal benefits of being in a lecture theatre with 200 other students and listening to a lecturer. I think if you take that and you move that online and you make it more convenient, and then you use that same time to really dig into what the thinking, what the knowledge of those particular learners is, that's hugely valuable. So I think really, like was just said before, it's about using the tools and then adapting that into the methodology to meet the learning outcomes.
Okay, great. But I can see you nodding in agreement, which is normally when I pick on people to ask their opinion about this. But the internationalization at your institution, I mean, how is it changing, and what opportunities are there in the future? I mean, Wolfgang obviously made the point about an international bricks and mortar change in your country, but in the short term, there is this need to accommodate international students and international partnerships in a different way, isn't there? Balint, sorry. It would just be good to find out a little bit about how your international approach is changing, if we can.
Sorry, I just couldn't unmute.
Yeah, no.
Yes, it has changed. On one hand, I missed some conferences in Atlanta and Miami, and I couldn't manage my journeys to China, which I'm very keen to do. But yes, we had to look at that. For example, newcomers couldn't enter, and it could happen in this September that they are still not maybe allowed or not able to enter. So we have to organize our courses in a blended way that part of our students will be present, and a group of them will be still at home far away and could join only online. So this is actually a challenge as well. But yes, we consider that there are a new type of cooperations where especially from the Far East and from North Africa, partners are asking for cooperation, like so maybe I don't know the right English expression for that. They wish to implement the study program or part of that of Metropolitan University to give a perspective for their students how like the European Union recognized study program, let's say in architecture, works, and maybe allow them to finish their studies after conducting the study program of a European university, let's say in China for 2 years, and then finishing up in 1 year abroad. I mean, from their perspective. So this kind of applications we haven't had before. Actually, zero interest on the side of higher education institutions from those parts of the world. Now we have.
Great. Yeah, there's I mean, there's probably a whole other hour we could do about collaboration with different countries, and particularly the global south and countries that will unfortunately take longer to come out of lockdowns and quarantine measures than Western Europe and North America, and Far East Asia. Unfortunately, that takes us to time. I think we've covered an awful lot in an hour. We've gone across Europe and back several times. So thank you all very much for joining us. It's been a really interesting discussion, and thank you to all the attendees too. There will be an on-demand version of this discussion made available on the Times Higher Education website, and also a summary article as well. So please feel free to revisit it and distribute it however is useful to you. Thank you all very, very much.
Thank you.